But people are messaging me and telling me that there is heavy drinking and there's cocaine involved. And there's a particular person whom I know this person's name. I'm not going to disclose it. I'm going to go to the police first, and then I will disclose it if it doesn't interfere in the investigation. But this person allegedly was offering people cocaine, and someone close to Nolan, one of his friends, told me that this person was offered cocaine and rejected it from this person. And I was also told, and this person told me that it's over 100% chance that Nolan was using cocaine during this period of time.
I want to know why Crooked Cop Tatum deleted his tweet to a question about whether or not the photo and video that he posted last week showing this Triton boat that Nolan took out to Horn Island, but according to them, they want us to believe that he was not on the boat as they were going back in when whatever happened to him happened to him. And I want to show y'all this so y'all can see how they are trying to cover this up. And I honestly believe that Tatum is also trying to help this Geico lizard who you see right here, Warren Hudson, with this, what seems like to us, a cover up about what really happened to Nolan Wells. I've been so busy with my site. These screenshots are from when I took them at the time these things were made, or I found out about them, but I never wrote about them at the time because I was over here busy, y'all. Okay, but I'm back. But look at this. Tatum says, breaking. Exclusive images shared of the Triton boat being towed by another boat after viral CETO dispatch call. Nolan Wells is confirmed not to be on board. These images were taken from the boat towing them. So this boat that is towing them is Bart. As you can see, these are the photos that Crooked Cop Tatum posted. Here's the video that Crooked Cop Tatum put up on social media to try to make us believe that, Nolan was not on this boat. Apparently, this is from July 4th. When Tatum had posted these photos and videos, someone asked him before or after the call. He says after the call. And if you look up there, I screenshotted this Tuesday at 1:49 p.m. I don't know why Crooked Cop Tatum did not put up photos or videos during the CETO phone call so we can see what is happening on this boat during that exact call if we compare it. If you take that phone call and you compare it to this bullshit that he put out, none of it makes sense. He says Nolan is not on the boat. We can clearly hear a female voice who we clearly see a female on the boat asking, is Nolan dead on the boat? We don't see no water in the boat. I don't see the boat sinking. So to come up here and try to say somebody's not on board, and water is not on board either. So Tatum says these photos and videos that he posted were after the CETO call. After the CETO call. After they called and said, oh, the boat is sinking. Oh, this and that. This is supposed to be after the call. But in the interview that the Geico lizard Warren Hudson did, if you pay attention, Warren said that after Bart tows them, Wyatt called CETO. Why would you call CETO if Bart has already towed the boat so y'all can get back inland?
Actually, my buddy Bart on the tide line is like, I'm going to pull y'all out to where we're out of all this, all this chaos. Because we left at 4:30 and there were still just as many people there, if not more, than when we got there. I mean, probably around the same amount. I mean, it was crazy. Like, there was a lot of people. And, eventually Bart pulls us out. We left at 4:30, but we really weren't pulled out away from everybody. We were probably about a quarter mile out, and we had the towing strap pulled from, Bart's port side cleat or starboard side cleat, and he was on our starboard side bow. And so it was rubbing on his power pole. So Bart turned around, pulled up next to our boat, and we were just trying to get it situated. So that's when Wyatt called CETO. And Wyatt was like, calls him.
CETO Assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles? Hello?
Hey.
Yes, how far is the water coming up, sir?
It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not. We got towed probably a quarter mile. Like I said, my buddy Bart drove his boat up next to ours after he pulled us out away from the island, and then he towed us a little more while we were trying to get the motor figured out. I mean, the motor would trim down. So then eventually, and the motor wouldn't trim down. And so eventually we figured out if you held the manual trim on the motor.
Okay, so that's enough. Y'all heard from the lizard, okay? Now, this is when the bilge pump was having problem, water was in the boat, they were sinking. This is when Bart pulled up and told them out because ultimately they canceled the CETO call because according to the captain, he already had contact with the grandfather. They didn't need the Coast Guard or any help. So if y'all didn't need the Coast Guard or any help, who helped y'all? Bart. So what was the point of calling CETO after he already had told y'all out of this issue that y'all were having? Warren Hudson's stepman, Judge Ashley Cole, in her statement, this is what she says. She says, Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully. He saw Nolan last at around 3 p.m. on July 4th. They left around 4:30 p.m. when the boat was taking on water and they had an issue with the bilge pump. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island and return inland later with another group of friends. But she never said anything about Bart pulling up. She never said anything about her stepson being told by Bart. Nothing at all about this. So as you can see, Wednesday at 1:28 a.m., I went back to the post and guess what? Tatum had deleted his reply to Maine before or after the call because remember, he said after the call. And as you can see right here, the person he responded to said, yeah, he deleted it because he definitely responded to me. And he did because I screenshotted it. And I screenshotted when he deleted it. Why did he delete it? He deleted it because it is suspicious that these boys are calling CETO after Bart has already told the boat for them. So what was the point of calling CETO?
Okay, let me get straight into something really important right now. Something specific, something you can actually check for yourself. Brandon Tatum put up a tweet, then took it down. And we need to talk about exactly what happened here because the details matter. So here's what went down. Tatum posted what he called exclusive images of the Triton, that's the boat Nolan had been on, being towed by another boat. This was after that viral Sea Dispatch call everyone's been talking about. His caption was pretty direct. He said Nolan confirmed not on board, and these images were taken from the towing boat. He posted video from that same moment too. Now here's where it gets interesting. Someone asked him straight up, was this footage from before or after the call? And Tatum answered plainly, after the call. That exchange, it's time-stamped. There's a screenshot saved at 1:49 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Then, at some point after that exchange happened, the whole tweet came down. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, do me a favor. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's talk about why this actually matters, separate from the fact that he deleted it. Because this is where things get genuinely worth examining. If those images and that video really are from after the emergency call, after a boat was supposedly taking on water badly enough to need professional towing, some people have pointed out that the footage doesn't show what you'd expect to see. No visible water pooling in the boat. Nothing that looks like a vessel in the middle of an active sinking emergency. That's a fair observation to raise about footage Tatum himself chose to publish as evidence. There's a second thing that doesn't quite line up, and it comes from comparing Tatum's own reporting against itself. In Warren Hudson's original interview, the sequence he describes is that Bart's boat pulled them a short distance away from the crowd first, and it was only after that, still dealing with the same mechanical trouble, that Wyatt called CETO. If that's accurate, it's actually a plausible explanation for why a boat that had already been given a short pull would still need an actual tow company afterward. Bart moved them away from the chaos but didn't solve the underlying problem or get them all the way home. That's worth stating plainly because it means this specific contradiction might actually have a reasonable answer already sitting in the friend group's own account, rather than being a genuine gap. I'd rather tell you that than manufacture a bigger problem than what's actually there. Now, we also need to address something directly, because it's already circulating alongside this story. Some people reacting to this footage have said, you can clearly hear a female voice on the disputed audio asking whether Nolan is dead on the boat. We need to be exact about this one more time. That interpretation has never been forensically confirmed by anyone on any side of this case. A digital forensics expert who examined one widely circulated enhanced version found it ran 20 seconds longer than the original recording with a different digital fingerprint entirely. Meaning at least one version being treated as clear evidence has already been shown not to match the source file. Clearly is doing a lot of work in a lot of these claims from people on every side of this story, and it's earned exactly 0 independent verification so far. Back to the deletion itself, because it's still the most concrete piece of this. A tweet coming down doesn't prove the claim inside it was false. People delete posts for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with hiding something. But Tatum has built real credibility on this case around showing his work, screenshots and timestamps laid out for people to check themselves, a specific checkable timing claim disappearing with no correction or explanation attached that we could find. It sits uncomfortably next to that reputation. Not because it proves anything, but because it takes away the one thing his own approach has been built on, letting people verify it themselves. If you've seen the original tweet, or a clearer copy of that timestamp, drop it below. I'll take a look. Now let's talk about something else that's been making the rounds.
But people are messaging me and telling me that there is heavy drinking and there's cocaine involved. And there's a particular person whom I know this person's name. I'm not going to disclose it. I'm going to go to the police first, and then I will disclose it if it doesn't interfere in the investigation. But this person allegedly was offering people cocaine, and someone close to Nolan, one of his friends, told me that this person was offered cocaine and rejected it from this person. And I was also told, and this person told me that it's over 100% chance that Nolan was using cocaine during this period of time. This person said it was 150% sure that when the toxicology comes back, that Nolan will have cocaine in his system.
But also, too, it's part of society that has been allowed to occur, which is it's gut-wrenching at best. Because if you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who were saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island, he was heavily drunk. And again, even with the drinking, there are so many conflicting stories. Only because I have spoken with adults who knew Nolan very well, coaches that were out there. One in particular, I think he told me he saw Nolan somewhere between like 2:45 and 3:30. He was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him too that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. Like that's, and it started at the very beginning. It was, oh, he was sloppy drunk. And I'm like, but was he though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use to kind of have us just accept that it was a drowning?
Here's the claim that spread fastest this week, and we're going to be exact about where it actually came from. Here's what Tatum actually said, as precisely as we can lay it out, because the specifics matter more than the summary version that spread online. He said people are messaging him, telling him there was heavy drinking and that there was, in his words, nose candy involved. He said he knows the name of a specific person he alleges was offering it to people that day, and that he's deliberately not disclosing that name publicly, saying he intends to go to police with it first, before considering whether disclosing it would interfere with the investigation. He said a friend close to Nolan told him Nolan was offered it by this person and turned it down. Here's where his own claim gets internally tangled, and it's worth naming directly rather than smoothing it over. In that same segment, Tatum said he was separately told by, in his description, a different source, that there's what he called a 100% chance Nolan was using that day, and that this source was, in his words, 150% sure toxicology will eventually confirm nose candy in Nolan's system. Sit with those two claims next to each other for a second because they don't actually agree with each other. One account relayed by Tatum has Nolan being offered it and rejecting it. Another account also relayed by Tatum in the same breath claims total certainty that Nolan was using it. Those are not the same story. A person can be offered something once and say no. That's a completely different claim from someone being 100% certain of ongoing use. If both of these came from real sources, at minimum they contradict each other on the most basic fact in dispute: whether Nolan actually used anything at all that day. To be fair to Tatum, he didn't present these two accounts as if they obviously agreed with each other, and he did repeatedly tell his own audience not to treat any of it as confirmed. That caution matters, and we're going to hold him to it the same way we'd hold anyone else to their own stated standard. But a claim built on two sources that don't actually match each other is weaker than the confident framing it's been given online, and that's worth saying plainly instead of letting the loudest version of it stand unchallenged. Not everyone covering this case has let that claim pass without a fight either. Commentator Willie D pushed back on it directly and publicly, and his core argument is worth hearing in full because it's a genuinely fair standard to apply. Extreme claims require evidence, he said. If someone's going to tell the world Nolan had drugs in his system, show the source, show the documentation, show anything beyond a pair of lips saying it. He also raised a pointed question about timing. Why is this specific claim surfacing now, weeks in, rather than being part of the story from the very beginning? And he made a point that applies no matter which way toxicology eventually comes back. Even if it confirms substances were involved, that still doesn't explain how an 18-year-old drowned surrounded by hundreds of people without anyone seeing it happen. We want to underline that last part ourselves in our own words, because it's the single most important thing in this entire segment. Even if toxicology eventually shows alcohol or anything else in Nolan's system, that finding on its own would not explain how he ended up in the water. It would not excuse or explain away any negligence by anyone who was with him. It would not make his death his fault in any way that matters legally or morally. If anything, it raises the opposite question, whether the people around him that day owed him more care, not less. Now here's something that directly complicates the heavily intoxicated narrative, and it comes from Christine herself in her own words, not from a friend's account or a commentator's guess. Christine has said she's spoken with adults who knew Nolan well, including a coach who was actually out on Horn Island that day. According to her, he told her he saw Nolan sometime between around 2:45 and 3:30 that afternoon, and that they talked for a real stretch of time about college, about his plans, about his life. His read on Nolan in that conversation? Perfectly fine. Not impaired, not sloppy. A young man having a normal conversation about his future with someone who'd known him for years. Christine's own reaction to that account is worth including directly, because it names the exact tension this entire segment has been circling. She said the sloppy drunk narrative started almost immediately, before any toxicology existed to back it up, and she's asked plainly whether that narrative exists because it's true or because it's a story that makes a drowning easier for the public to simply accept without asking harder questions. We're not going to tell you Christine's account settles this any more than we told you Tatum's claim settles it. A coach's secondhand recollection of a conversation relayed through a grieving mother is not a toxicology report either, but it is a specific named category account. Someone who actually knew Nolan, who says he was physically present with him during the exact window everyone's been arguing about, sitting directly across from an anonymous claim sourced to unnamed messages. Those two accounts cannot both be fully true. One of them is wrong, or at least significantly overstated. As of tonight, nobody outside a toxicology lab can tell you which one. If you have a source on either side of this, the timestamp, the toxicology status, anything solid, that's what actually moves this forward. Drop it below.
Miss Rachel just said something on social media about the Nolan Wells case that I think you need to hear. What she said was the truth that all of us know. That if the races were different, meaning if Nolan Wells was white and the three friends were black, this investigation would be going very differently. And she is getting massive backlash for saying this. But I want to acknowledge how important it is to have allies. I met a man from the civil rights movement. His name is Hezekiah Watkins. Look him up if you don't know his name. His story is pretty amazing. And he had a conversation with me and my white colleague, a man by the name of Dr. Adam Frower, about what true allyship looks like. And he said true allyship is not just saying you support Black people and equality and equity and diversity and inclusion. It's standing next to your Black friends in the Black community while the bullets are flying. That was his exact phrase, meaning that you have to stand in the line of fire. You have to stand next to people when there's something to risk. And Miss Rachel is demonstrating what true allyship looks like. She very likely knew that she was going to get backlash for saying this because she's been saying things advocating for social justice for a long time. She spoke up against ICE and other causes, acknowledging that she is someone who's interested in justice. My favorite thing that she said this whole time was just simply one word. Somebody left a comment on her social media saying, can't you just stick to singing kids songs? And she replied, no. That is a true ally, and I think we need more of that in moments like this. So thank you, Miss Rachel.
Some voices in this case carry weight just because of how many people actually hear them. This week, one of the biggest names in children's media stepped into this story, and what she said split her own audience right down the middle. Miss Rachel, a creator with more than 2.3 million followers on Threads alone, known to an entire generation of parents for something as far from true crime as it gets, posted her own take on this case directly to that massive audience. Her position stated plainly, she believes this investigation would have unfolded differently if the races were reversed. If Nolan had been white and the friend group had been Black. She added that Nolan and his family deserve justice, full stop. That's not a small thing to say to millions of people who follow you for nursery rhymes and toddler content, not true crime commentary. And it landed exactly the way you'd expect something that big to land. Fast, loud, and split almost perfectly down the middle. Here's why we're covering this as its own moment, instead of folding it into everything else. A statement like this doesn't have to be provable to matter, and it doesn't have to be wrong to be worth examining carefully either. It's a claim about a hypothetical, what would have happened in a version of events that didn't happen, which means by definition, nobody can actually test it against evidence. That doesn't make it meaningless. Plenty of people watching this case, including legal commentators and civil rights attorneys we've already covered, have raised versions of the same concern using the actual documented pattern in front of them. The early no foul play statement, the pace of the investigation, the treatment of the family's questions. Miss Rachel's version compresses all of that into one sentence, aimed at an audience that mostly wasn't already following true crime coverage of this case at all. That's arguably the real story here. Not whether she's right, but how far a single sentence from someone with that kind of reach can travel into rooms this case had never been discussed in before. Millions of parents who've never heard of Horn Island, who couldn't tell you who Ben Crump is, got a version of this case for the first time through someone they trust for completely unrelated reasons. We're not going to tell you whether she's right. We don't think anyone honestly can, given that it's a claim about a version of events that never happened. What we can tell you is that this is exactly how a regional Mississippi case became something tens of millions of people outside true crime circles are now aware of. One sentence from one enormous platform doing more to spread this story than months of local reporting ever could on its own. Where do you actually land on this? Not on the case overall, specifically on whether a claim like hers, unprovable by its own nature, still deserves to be taken seriously as part of the conversation. Tell us honestly below. Now let's talk about something that might actually prove a point here.
Y'all remember how T. Shepard broke down in the Rolling Stones interview how 18-year-old Nolan Wells put his phone on the dashboard? I don't believe him, and I'm going to tell y'all why. This might even prove it. Go to the bottom where it says that when we hopped off the boat to get onto the island, the water was up to our chest and Nolan's boat was further away from the island. Then we were, which means he hopped into the water, it would have been up to his neck. Now, before I go to the part where T. Shepard had mentioned allegedly where 18-year-old Nolan Wells had put his phone and where there was about 15 other phones, let's go right here where they said that they met that day, and it's one of kind of those things Shepard said. He did come off that he really liked her, but That was the only time they ever hung out was Horn Island on July 4th. I feel like it's very important that he mentions that only Nolan and not specifically that everybody's first time with hanging out with Katie was that day. So I feel like other people already had knew Katie that was there because Katie had came with somebody that 18-year-old Nolan Wells ended up meeting Katie through the people that Katie had ended up coming with. Hold on. Right here is where it allegedly says that Shepard said, Wells, he said, place his phone in the boat of one of their friends. When Nolan got in the water, he put his phone on the boat dash, also with probably 15 other phones. The uncle did not want to be named. You know they done fucked up, don't you? Now, I just showed y'all in the message where she had allegedly claimed that 18-year-old Nolan Wells' boat was further back away from the island. So how would Shepard be able to see 18-year-old Nolan Wells put that phone on the dash of the boat if he's on a different boat? Not only that, why would there be 15 phones over there on that boat, the boat that seemed to be the furthest from the island, allegedly, 1 second, and the boat that we've heard of so far is the furthest away from the island, as she says that Nolan's boat was further away from the island. She stated right here, it'll be about 5 to 10 kids on the boat. So then why would there be 15 phones that ends up on 18-year-old Nolan Wells' boat when that's the boat that's furthest from the island, especially from theirs? And if kids are so comfortable with putting their phones up on the boat, wouldn't it make more sense that they put their phones on the boat that was a little more closer to the island? And that if T. Shepard was able to see 18-year-old Nolan Wells put his phone on the boat, and also Jayvon Williams was able to see 18-year-old Nolan Wells put his phone on the boat, wouldn't that make sense that that would be the boat that they put it on, the boat that T. Shepard was on, allegedly? And then you got to think about what it stated that Jayvon Williams' mom had said allegedly down in the comments when she said no, stating that Jayvon had said that he waited at the dock or he had got his phone at the dock when the boat arrived. What boat would have left after Jayvon Williams originally had gave his story? His original story was that he left shortly after 4, correct? That would allegedly put T. Shepard leaving that island after Jayvon Williams because allegedly the person that of the boat that had the altercation, she inboxed me. She had stated that they had left around 5 or 5:30. Originally, Jayvon Williams stated that he had left shortly after 4. Originally, Jayvon Williams had stated that he had saw 18-year-old Nolan Wells visiting with a girl as well as talking to a group of friends as he left. So when you take Jayvon Williams off of that island, who no longer has that real alibi of the altercation and such like that, that in-the-face altercation, who really doesn't have that real solid alibi right there? T. Shepard and also that boat with the people that came on that boat with T. Shepard and left with T. Shepard on that boat. And I'll tell you why. Because why would Jayvon Williams need to change his story when Jayvon Williams' story already got him up out of there and everything? There was no reason to change that story, was it? But in order for T. Shepard's story, in order to fit and everything, and for people to no longer think that it was 18-year-old Nolan Wells, the story needed to switch and change. But I truly felt like it was 18-year-old Nolan Wells. It might not have been in that precise altercation moment where they was yelling, but 18-year-old Nolan Wells was on that boat. And I truly felt like something happened with 18-year-old Nolan Wells on that boat. And I truly felt like that's the boat that Katie rode out on. And the reason why I feel that way, in my opinion, is because they said that there was 2 married couples on their boat. There's an aunt, there's an uncle. The uncle did not want to be mentioned, as well as there's another, the woman that allegedly says that it was her boat that they had the altercation on. Her and her husband are there, and she says that her husband is either ex-Marine and or military. She also has stated that they always keep their head on a swivel, but I'm trying to figure out if the head is on a swivel, how would you not know a boat that left right there with you that you said was right next to you just was a little further than from the island than yours was? How would you not notice that it had left and that 18-year-old Nolan Wells was not on that boat? Heads on a swivel, people paying attention, you would have noticed that boat left, and you would have noticed if 18-year-old Nolan Wells was on that boat. No, the only way it makes sense that Jayvon Williams was waiting at that dock for his phone to arrive is if he left it on the boat that Shepard rode back on, in my opinion. Because originally you have Jayvon Williams stating that he and 18-year-old Nolan Wells put their phone in a box on the boat. Now, if he put that in the box on the boat. Nobody else would have known where 18-year-old Nolan Wells' phone and him was except the two of them. And that's why you still have 18-year-old Nolan Wells' phone making it back to the mainland due to the fact that nobody knew that those two phones were together inside of that box that was on that boat. And now that 18-year-old Nolan Wells' phone has made it back to the mainland, now they got to find a way to do something with this phone because that Life 360 is on it. And I read that if it's on the iPhone, that it'll send you alerts every now and again of the Life 360. You see, also on the same boat that Shepard was said to be on allegedly, there was also two other young men that was on that boat that was said to be allegedly, I guess, the children of the lady that stepped up and said that that was her boat that the altercation occurred on. And there was multiple men and other people that was on that boat at the same time. See, so allegedly Jayvon Williams never even had a reason for people to suspect Jayvon Williams at all until he changed his story from the original story to something new. And then I had to think, well, why would there be multiple claims that Katie is the one that had the phone allegedly? You see, there was that girl Sierra that got in the comment section that had claimed that that's where Jayvon's mom had got it from. And Jayvon had allegedly got in the comments and said exactly to her. There was also that person, Monica Janine, that had left that comment at the same time stating that, the phone came from Katie. And I'm like, wait a minute. If the phone came from Katie, how would the phone come from Katie? I couldn't think of any other way that the phone could come from Katie. Then we're like, dang, the sister of Katie said that in a post that Katie had left with her brother and sister-in-law. And I'm like, well, I'm not hearing about no married couples out there or anything like that. So I'm sitting here thinking that somebody had to come and get her allegedly. But all in all, I truly felt like that brother and that sister-in-law of the sister of Katie was there at the beach the whole time. And that's the boat that allegedly the altercation occurred on. As you have to think, if 18-year-old Nolan Wells was said that he was going to hang out with Katie, he was going to be with Katie or whatnot, and he was so adamant about it and everything like that, then I would think that that boat would be very close for 18-year-old Nolan Wells to be able to know exactly which boat that Katie was leaving on. And that's why I feel like it was so important that I think it was Wyatt's mom that had alleged that Katie's boat was next to their boat. Because the same lady that alleged that the altercation occurred on her boat, she said that their boat was also next to Nolan them boat. I'm thinking that those boats are one and the same boat, everybody. Because it does not make sense why Jayvon Williams would change his story and then all of a sudden introduce a new boat with his so-called peoples in it further down the island. And it also didn't make sense that Katie and 18-year-old Nolan Wells would also leave and go up on the island to go talk only for a few minutes. And not only that, for nobody to ever say that they saw Katie and 18-year-old Nolan Wells walk anywhere, that's very odd. You think a young lady that met a young man for the first time, and this is a random young man is just going to go off on an island alone with him and not allow the people to not allow enough respect to tell the people that she came with that she was finna go walk with him? And do you think that 18-year-old Nolan Wells is so dismissive of his friends that he's so worried about Katie and so focused on Katie that 18-year-old Nolan Wells went stop to mention to his friends, hey, we finna go for a little stroll? No, it's because I truly feel like Katie came on that boat that was right next to 18-year-old Nolan Wells, the same boat that they alleged that that altercation occurred on. I feel like that boat is the boat that they need to be focusing on, and they need to be focusing on Jayvon Williams and asking him why he will be willing to switch his story for somebody else, allegedly.
Here's a voice we haven't spent real time on yet, and it might be the single most important one in this entire case because of exactly who it's coming from. Jayvon Williams isn't a stranger relaying secondhand rumors. He's described across multiple outlets as Nolan's best friend, and on CNN, on the record, in his own name, he said something that directly contradicts the account the rest of the friend group has given. Investigators' own Marine Patrol report says several friends told them that when they left the island, Nolan was in the company of an unknown woman and had chosen to stay behind. Jayvon's response to that, to CNN, was direct. That doesn't square with the person he knew. In his words, he's never known Nolan to stay back while his friends left. If Nolan rode out with you, he came back with you every single time. No exceptions. That's not a vague feeling. That's a specific testable claim about a pattern of behavior from someone who says he watched that pattern hold for years. Here's what makes Jayvon's account particularly significant, instead of just one more contradiction to add to the pile. He's also gone on record saying he doesn't believe this case is centered on race, a position that cuts directly against part of the public conversation around this case, and one that took some real willingness to say out loud, given how charged that conversation has been. At the same time, in that same breath, he's maintained that the specific details around how Nolan ended up without his phone and his keys simply don't add up to him. That's a genuinely rare combination. Someone close to Nolan willing to publicly push back on the racial framing some observers have applied, while still refusing to accept the friend group's own explanation for the parts of the story that don't sit right with him. That combination matters because it can't be dismissed as someone chasing an agenda in either direction. He's not confirming the darkest version of this story, and he's not accepting the simplest one either. He's occupying the hardest position in the whole case, genuinely unconvinced from the inside without a theory to sell. Nolan's own father has echoed a version of this same confusion, saying plainly that the family can't fathom why their son would ever separate from his group like that they specifically raised him to stay with the people he came with. That's not proof of anything on its own. Parents don't always know every choice their child makes in the moment, but it's now at least two people who knew Nolan closely, his father and the friend he grew up with, both saying the same core thing independently. This doesn't match who we knew him to be. We want to be fair to the other side of this too, the same way we've tried to be fair throughout this whole case. People do things once that don't match their usual pattern. A single afternoon, a girl he just met, a decision made in the moment. None of that is impossible just because it was out of character. But when the person telling you it's out of character is someone who spent years actually watching that character up close, it carries real weight. More weight, honestly, than most of what's gone viral in this case so far. Here's a question that sounds simple, and the more you actually sit with it, the more it isn't. Dr. Benjamin Hudson, Warren Hudson's own father, publicly offered $50,000 for information leading to answers about what happened to Nolan. And one reaction to that news, watched by a lot of people, put the confusion plainly. If the working theory this whole time has been an accidental drowning, why would anyone need to offer a cash reward for information at all? A drowning doesn't usually require a tip line. A drowning doesn't usually require someone to come forward with what they know. That's the kind of thing you offer a reward for when you believe a specific person or a specific piece of information is still out there and isn't being shared voluntarily. That's a fair question, and it deserves a real answer instead of a dismissive one. Here's the honest, complete picture of why a reward like this gets offered, even in cases where the working theory is still just undetermined, not confirmed foul play. Rewards for information aren't exclusively a murder case tool. They're common in any case where investigators believe there are witnesses who saw something relevant and simply haven't come forward, which in this specific case is not a hypothetical. We've walked through a genuine 30-minute gap between the distress call and the boat's actual departure that nobody's explained. A last confirmed sighting around 3 that afternoon. Hundreds of people on that island in that water that same day. A reward doesn't require the family or investigators to believe Nolan was murdered. It requires them to believe that somebody out there, one of those hundreds of people, knows a piece of this timeline that hasn't surfaced yet and might come forward for 50,000 reasons to do so if they hadn't already found one on their own. So the honest answer to does this mean foul play is confirmed, is no. A reward is not a confirmation of anything specific, but the reaction in that clip isn't wrong to find it strange either, because a reward this size is also not the move a family or a friend's family makes if they're fully at peace with he drowned. Case closed. It's the move you make when you believe there's more to know, whether or not you're prepared to say publicly what you think that more actually is. Now here's the detail that actually matters most in this specific version of the story, and it's the same one we raised back when this reward first climbed to its current total. This $50,000 isn't coming from a stranger or an advocacy group with no connection to the friend group. It's coming from Warren Hudson's own father, a man whose own son has spent weeks being scrutinized, accused, and threatened online in connection with this case. Think about what that actually means. If Dr. Hudson believed his son had something to hide, funding a bigger, faster push for answers is close to the last thing he'd do. Answers cut in every direction, including toward his own family, if there was ever anything there to find. The more plausible reading, and we think it's the fairer one, is that this is a father who's watched his son get dragged through a version of this story that Warren himself has consistently denied, a role in Nolan's death, tampering with the phone, and has decided that the fastest way to actually clear his son's name isn't silence. It's money on the table, specifically aimed at getting the real, complete timeline out into the open, wherever it actually leads. There's a second pot of money in this case that gets confused with the reward constantly, and it's worth separating them clearly because they're not the same thing and they don't serve the same purpose. Ben Crump has publicly thanked entertainment executive Byron Allen for donating $100,000 specifically to the family's GoFundMe. That money, according to Crump's own description, isn't a reward for tips. It's meant to help the family retain the best independent experts available, the forensic pathologists, the audio engineers, the oceanic engineers we've covered elsewhere in this case. That's an investigation fund. The reward money, Sharpton's $50,000, Tyler Perry's $50,000, Terrell Owens' $25,000, and now Dr. Hudson's $50,000, bringing the total to $175,000, is a completely separate stream aimed specifically at the public. Come forward, tell us what you saw, here's what it's worth to this family to actually hear it from you. Conflating those two funds makes the story feel more sinister than it necessarily is, as if all of this money is one giant bounty on someone's head. It isn't. One fund pays experts to examine evidence properly. The other pays witnesses to actually speak. Both exist because months into this case, the family and the people around it have concluded that the normal channels haven't produced what they needed on their own. So where does that leave the actual question this segment opened with? A reward this size doesn't prove foul play happened. It also doesn't prove nothing happened beyond an accident. What it proves plainly is that the people closest to this case, including someone whose own son is one of the people under suspicion, don't believe the story is fully told yet. That's not the behavior of people who think this is over. It's the behavior of people who think somebody out there is still holding a piece of it back, and who are willing to pay real money to find out who. We're not going to tell you which explanation is right. We're going to tell you that the confusion in that original clip is worth taking seriously instead of laughing off, because it's actually one of the more honest reactions this case has produced. A reward is a strange thing to offer for a drowning. It makes a lot more sense as a reward for the truth. There's a technical detail in how this reward is actually structured that's worth understanding, because it changes what it's really asking for. It's not simply money for a tip. Every public description of this reward has tied it to information leading to an arrest and conviction of whoever is responsible for Nolan's death. That phrasing matters. It means this money doesn't pay out for a rumor or a theory or even a genuinely useful piece of the timeline on its own. It pays out only if what comes forward actually holds up all the way through a criminal case reaching a conviction. That's a much higher bar than call this number if you know something. And it tells you something about how seriously the people behind this reward are treating the possibility that this ends in actual charges, not because they've been told it will, but because they've structured the incentive as if it might. It's also worth putting this reward next to something we've already covered elsewhere in this case cluster, because the comparison is genuinely instructive. Daniel Irvin's family, a case we've covered in depth on this channel, has also had reward money attached to their search for answers in a case that did eventually produce actual charges, even if only for evidence tampering rather than the death itself. That's not proof Nolan's case follows the same path. Every case is its own set of facts. But it does show that reward money in a case like this one isn't unusual window dressing. In at least one comparable case, it sat alongside a process that genuinely did move toward real legal consequences months after the reward was first offered. That's the honest frame to hold this in. A reward doesn't confirm an outcome, but it's also not nothing. It's a specific structured bet made with real money by people who are choosing to act as if this case is still very much solvable, rather than treating accidental drowning as the end of the conversation.
Now, there have been a lot of different accounts about whether he was on the boat when he came back from Horn Island, when he was supposed to come back from Horn Island. He never came back from Horn Island. And you can clearly hear on that version, which we obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Research. They released it. It's not something off TikTok or Insta. And that's what you hear. Let me hear 184 one more time, please.
Detail assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles? Hello?
What'd you say? Hey,
Yes, how far is the water coming up, sir?
it's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down.
Crime Stories investigative reporter. What are we hearing?
Nancy, this is the audio call from the boat that Nolan Wells took out to Horn Island. And the boat is attempting to leave Horn Island because the boat is taking on water. What we are hearing is the call from the boat to the group they have.
Cito, let me help you. Let me help you. Reminder, Dave Mack, we've only got 1 hour to cover a lot of territory. That is the Cito call where the grandson of the boat owner thinks that they're taking on water. Joining me right now, special guest Brandon Tatum. He is a former police officer with Tucson PD, and he is the star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube. He has interviewed Nolan's friends. Now, we're about to bring on 2 experts, each one taking a different viewpoint on that call. But, Officer Tatum, thank you for being with us tonight. No matter what you say, just know you're going to get hate mail. Doesn't matter what you say. If the angel Gabriel came down right now and spoke on this case, he would get hate mail. That said, what do you make of that audio, officer?
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for having me on. If you put the audio within context, it is an impossibility unless these people are prophesying that somehow they're saying Nolan's name or projecting that Nolan is somehow injured, hurt, or killed, because we have witnesses that have come out. When I interviewed Warren, a lot of those kids that I talked to already alluded to this way before the audio came out, that they were gone. And people had already saw Nolan after they had left. The young lady, Katie, that he was hanging out with, I saw a text message from her alluding to the fact that she never saw him get on that boat at all. We have video of the boat that we shared on our social media page, and it shows all the occupants on the boat, and Nolan was not there. And so if a person thinks that they've heard something on the audio, they have to compare it with context. Maybe they said, "Is it dead?" talking about items that could potentially have died or damaged on the boat, given the fact that they were sinking. So I think people need to put this in context and reevaluate what they're listening to on the video, because if you are going to make a staunch stance in the wrong direction, in my opinion, by saying they're obviously talking about Nolan, it is incredibly impossible. One more thing, real quick, that when you look at where they were at when they made the phone call and their GPS coordinates, it literally put them on the island. And we know, and not on the physical island, but really close proximity to the island. And we know, because we have another video of Nolan being out there and also all the other boats surrounding him, that this would have had to happen very near to hundreds of people in hundreds of different boats. So somebody would have seen something if there was a dramatic commotion like this occurring on that boat.
I hear what you're saying, Officer Brandon Tatum. That last part that you said, that there were hundreds of people around and they would have seen what happened, that part, I disagree with that. John Mobley joining us, veteran trial lawyer out of South Carolina. John, take off your defense hat one moment and let's address that statement. Do I have to say Tupac? That just comes off the top of my head. Crimes happen all the time in a crowded area and nobody sees anything. Either they say they didn't see anything, or they really didn't see anything, because it all blends in, right? It all blends in. I've had a little boy thrown off the 3rd level of the Mall of America almost to his death. He did die and he was brought back to life. Nobody saw what happened. A guy threw him over People were all over the mall. The food court was crowded. Nobody saw. I had like 2 witnesses. So I think part of it is, Mobley, you don't expect to see something, and so your mind is not interpreting, it's not intercepting what you're physically seeing. And again, we don't know what happened. We don't know why Nolan Wells has a red mark on the back of his occipital. We don't know. Was he hit? Did he fall? Then fall off a boat? It could have been any number of things. Some nefarious, some an accident, some negligent. My point is, just because there's a lot of people around, that does not guarantee you witnesses, Mobley. You know that better than anybody with all the cases you've tried.
Well, Nancy, I got to call it like I see it. I think there are 2 things I want to say to address that. The first part, I would agree with you that, yes, a lot of people can be around and they can notice something, and something can happen rather, and people not see it. However, I think the way that the human mind works, we would all agree, is we perceive things all the time, okay? And we may perceive something that at the time we perceive it, it is not deemed significant. However, in this case, I do believe that if someone did see something that they didn't pay particular attention to involving Nolan Wells, once all of this has come out, the way the mind works is it'll trigger what they saw before, because now it becomes significant. Okay, so I do agree that people can perceive things and not pay attention to them, but when something significant happens later, sort of like being robbed, you're not paying attention what everybody's wearing, but if that one of somebody robs you, and later on you have to recall what that person is wearing, what they look like, you can recall it because it's important at that point. But at the time they perceived it, it was not important. So that's what I want to make sure I discuss. And I do want to address, you talk about the red mark on the back of his head. I mean, I think that is a red herring. That's something that everybody kind of latched onto because they're so desperate for any information that might be related to the cause of his death. But even the own pathologist that conducted the autopsy did not
put him up. Mobley, are you a medical doctor? Yes, no.
I know how to examine forensic evidence based on the countless homicides that I've tried.
Not hearing, yes, no. You're not a medical doctor.
I'm a juris doctor.
Are you a medical examiner?
I am not.
No. Put up the back diagram, the back of the head of Nolan Wells from the second autopsy right now. You know what? I give it to you, Mobley. You're a great trial lawyer. A medical examiner, you ain't. And I don't know why you're saying people are latching onto this, grabbing at straws. I'm looking right at it, man. Should I believe you or my lying eyes? I am looking at the second autopsy. And I have questioned multiple actual medical examiners, actual doctors that say that means something. Put him up again. In what world would the first medical examiner remove Nolan's throat if it did not have something probative about it, something that proves something? Did they remove his toe? No. His elbow? No. His eyeball? His nose? No. They took his throat. Do not tell me that a medical doctor, which you are not, took a throat out of this young man because it means nothing. And then, you know what? I can't even hear you. Straight out to Joe Scott Morgan joining us, professor of forensics, death investigator. That second doctor did not highlight that in red for nothing. That doctor is not grabbing at straws, as Mobley said. I don't know why he's saying that.
No, you're right. He has purpose. We have purpose in everything that we do in the medical legal world. And so when you see this highlighted area, it's unique in the way he has diagrammed it here. He even demonstrates it that it has almost like margins to it. And, that's what has left a big question for us, because it's not like it's diffuse all over the place where you've got these kind of spotty alignments. He's got a margin. It almost looks like a rectangle, doesn't it? Well, when we begin to see things like that, we think about patterns. And that's some of the questions that have yet to be answered. But what he does say in his relative to the second examination is that he did a multi-layered dissection. Now, this area had not been dissected by the ME's office in Mississippi. So what he's doing is he's going layer by layer. We're talking about the skin. We're talking about the subcu fat. We're talking about the musculature that's under there. And yes, there is musculature under there. And what his conclusion is, Nancy, is that there's significant decomposition at this point in time. So he cannot make a determination about these markings one way or another. He needs more information. And admittedly, in this second autopsy, he says this is pending investigation. And that's key here.
Okay. Joe Scott Morgan.
Yes.
He, the first medical examiner, removed the throat.
Yes.
No other part of the body, except for the lungs, removed the throat and the lungs. We know why he took the lungs. I don't have to be a death investigator like yourself with 10,000 death investigations under my belt to know why he took the lungs, to see if Nolan drowned. But the fact that someone has a lungs full of water does not tell me how they got in the water. Did he fall? Was he hit? Was he held under? Was it an accident? Did you see that video? Pull it up if you can, control room, of all those ships, all those boats out there. If he was between one of those boats, lost his footing, went under, got the riptide, no one may have noticed. All right? No one may have noticed. Look at all that. And there were apparently 300 or so people out there. This is just a tiny microcosm. It's July the 4th. Everybody's at Horn Island having a good time. So it could be any number of ways he landed under the water. But my point is, that's why they took the lungs. Why? The throat.
Well, because the throat and the throat area, as you're referring to it as, it's actually the organs of the neck. We're talking about the larynx, the pharynx, our windpipe, essentially, and everything else that's connected therein. That's the conveyance to get into the lungs. So one of the things, what they're looking at here, Nancy, to put it very bluntly, is they're looking for any possibility that his breathing could have been compromised. Well, how is that compromised? Well, when you begin to think about, if you put your hand in the midline of your throat, right here, okay, you begin to think about the trachea, which is encompassed right here. Was it compromised in any way? Are there any focal areas of hemorrhage? Has it been crushed? You would go up into the neck. I suspect that the tongue was probably removed as well. You're going to look at the hyoid, which, did not accompany the body. But all of this has been retained. There's nothing abnormal about the state retaining the organs of the neck. This happens very, very frequently in cases like this because they want to be able to go back and examine it. And also for the future, they either want to get a consult on it or it has evidentiary probative value here moving forward with